Let's go.
Two questions for you. First off, hope you're doing well.
Thank you.
Yesterday, the interesting combination of Elizabeth Warren and Joe Wilson sent a letter to Secretaries Rubio and Bessent inquiring about the possible unwinding of broad sanctions on Syria, including investment sanctions, which leads to the question, where does the State Department stand right now on Syria? Is it more the European flavor of kind of opening up the arms a little bit? Is it Israel's view of staying away? It's too dangerous right now. If you can give an overview, it'd be great.
I can give you a little bit, certainly. I don't know if a full overview or not, but we are monitoring the Syrian interim authorities' actions in general across a number of issues as we determine and think about the future U.S. policy for Syria. We also continue to call for an inclusive, civilian-led government that can ensure national institutions are effective, responsive, and representative. Local ownership and broad societal support is necessary for stability in Syria and the region, as recent deadly violence on the coast demonstrated. Long-term stability and prosperity for the people of Syria requires a government that protects all Syrians equally. Ultimately, the United States wants a Syria that lives in peace with its neighbors, respects human rights, and prohibits terrorists from using its territory as a safe haven. Clear designs there, clear parameters, easy to understand, and we're watching to see how they behave and how they react.
Second question for you. U.S.-South Africa relations obviously not good right now after declaring the ambassador persona non grata. A new issue arising now, the South African presidency putting pressure on the Johannesburg City Council not to move forward with an effort to rename the street upon which the U.S. consulate resides in honor of a Palestinian hijacker. That move by the South African presidency, is that as a result of direct pressure from the State Department, or is that being done on their own volition to try to mend fences?
Well, we have seen the reporting on the issue, and we don't comment on internal deliberations between really any city and its government, certainly the city of Johannesburg and the government in this case of South Africa. And perhaps South Africa would refer you to Johannesburg or South Africa for more details. But that's what I have for you.
Did State get involved in any manner on this?
That's what I have for you.
Okay, thank you.
All right, Matt Lee, who's still, he's scrolling. He's scrolling.
I'm trying to find something and I can't find it.
Well, welcome to my world. Yes, Nadia.
Thank you, Tammy. Two questions. On Sudan first, the army has took over the presidential palace. Do you see a change on the ground, and what is the U.S. position regarding this development? And second, on Gaza, the Israelis are declaring that they want to annex Gaza, or parts of Gaza at least. Is there any new initiative to bring them back to the negotiation table for the ceasefire?
Well, first on your first question, the SAF, the Sudanese Armed Forces, they have retaken the presidential palace in Khartoum. The ongoing fighting in Khartoum further underscores the devastating consequences of the conflict for the people of Sudan, and we continue to urge the warring parties to cease hostilities and facilitate the safe, unhindered movement of life-saving humanitarian assistance. So, we're watching that. I think the world should be. Much of it is watching that situation, and that seems to be an important event. But we're watching and we're aware of it. As far as Gaza, look, we're still dealing with the efforts to have a ceasefire, which we had and was courtesy of Hamas, broken because of their lack of action on the parameters of the ceasefire itself. We, of course, stand by our ally Israel, as I mentioned, every day, happily so. So I certainly won't comment on or speculate on other hypotheses of what people think is going or not going to happen. I think the main goal is, humanitarian supplies, the nature of the violence stopping. That is the sole focus of the nature of where we're at this point. I'm going to, I don't know.
Can I follow up on it?
I'll get back to you, Saeed. Let's keep going here.
So today was
this is your last chance. Yes, sir.
Today was supposed to be the deadline for the visa review that was called for in the executive order. There's some indication that deadline may have actually been extended. Can you shed any light on that?
I can tell you that the deadline is now not today. Okay. I can't tell you the specifics, but it's don't expect that to be that today is a day that something will have to come out. Of course, what we do know is that what I can say to you is that the Department of State is committed to protecting our nation and its citizens by upholding the highest standards of national security and public safety through our visa process. As laid out by Trump's executive order, which is what initiated this dynamic, the visa adjudication process must ensure that U.S.-bound foreign travelers do not pose a threat to the national security and public safety of the United States. This was obviously a huge discussion on September 12th, 2001. And this is an issue that Americans care about and the nation's safety requires. The department, however, does not comment on internal deliberations or communications to the extent where, at least I can tell you that the deadline is not today.
Okay, and then just one other thing, which is also kind of it's a very brief thing, but you know, this lawsuit that's going on that's been the topic of, much attention about on the AEA, to deport.
Well, you obviously know I'm not going to speak to anything you're going to be asking me because it involves a legal process. And a filing even today.
Well, I know, but it says that there's cabinet-level discussions about using a state secrets authority to...
Matt, you know, and that's
well,
fine.
I know, but I have to ask.
And you do have to ask. And this is, I think, for everyone watching and everyone here, they're learning from you, unfortunately. Yes, absolutely ask. That's part of it. Americans wondering, what is it you guys are looking at? What are you concentrating on? But also learning that when you've got a process within the legal system and also diplomatic conversations, et cetera, there are certain things that I can't speak about. And that's one of them. But thank you, sir.
Thank you.
Andrea Mitchell.
Hi. Thank you so much, Tammy. The President acknowledged today that if there are mistakes that were made in taking some of the people to El Salvador, in the identifications of people, that they will be corrected. What are the efforts or the obligation of the State Department to follow up some of the complaints from families that their relatives were taken and are not gang members and do not have a violent history, to follow up with El Salvador? What rights do people have once they are taken to El Salvador and are in that prison under human rights and under State Department procedures when they are taken under the rubric of national security?
Well, a few things, of course. I don't speak for the White House or the President. He had some great comments to make earlier today, as you know, as you're referencing, and I think his comments speak for themselves. I also can't speak about the individuals who have been transported or legal mechanisms or diplomatic mechanisms regarding their status. But what I can say is that our relationship with President Bukele is excellent. That this isn't a situation where there's no communication or a relationship that doesn't continue on with El Salvador or the president. And of course, this is an issue that we also continue to focus on. So that I can tell you is if the president mentioned it, I think that sends a signal, if not more so, about his commitment and the nature of what he knows and what he says he's going to do about it, and that's where we're going to leave it.
Let me just follow up, because the video certainly that was taken by El Salvador showed some harsh treatment. Mm-hmm. Does the U.S. feel any obligation in terms of human rights or legal authority when people are taken to another country, to a prison, to follow up on what the conditions are in which they're being held?
Well, again, that is also DHS. It's not the State Department's purview in that kind of a framework. Even the removing of people from the country is not the State Department's purview. That's a question for the DHS, but it's certainly not something I can even speculate on, or I'm not going to speak on the nature of El Salvador's process and how it handles the nature of the people that they repatriated.
They're taken under the authority of the Secretary of State.
Well, that was implemented by the Department of Homeland Security. So, yes. All right, now, Jen, yes.
Humera from
Humera.
No, that's okay.
This is, in all honesty, and if I was on Broadway, it might be a different situation. It's kind of hard to see. So you'll have to forgive me in the sense of that. Humera, yes.
Thanks, Tammy. Just a few follow-ups to colleagues' questions. I need to take this out. Nadia asked about Defense Minister Katz's comments about annexation. I just want to make it clear, does the Trump administration support Israel annexing or permanently holding territory in Gaza? And is the administration doing anything specifically to reopen the border for the flow of humanitarian aid?
Again, we're in a dynamic where there is diplomatic conversations happening. We're still working to implement ceasefires and dealing with issues and questions regarding what can happen on the ground when there's still hostilities and still conflict. I will not speak to or guess about what the president is going to do, what he's thinking. It's not my place. And the good news is we have a president and a secretary of state, as I've mentioned a few times, that are not shy men, that you will hear from them, and you do, courtesy of social media, courtesy of statements from this department or the White House. So it's certainly not my place. We want to have facts of the matter that I can state to you regarding our positions. And it is, I think, as I've mentioned to many of you, after 25 plus years of being on talk radio and television, where there is guessing or opinion, we can't do that. And so I'm clearly very strict in that regard.
One more.
Yes,
can I have
sir.
one more on Syria?
One more on Syria.
Okay, thank you. And thanks for that serious statement. That might actually be the clearest and the first time that administration talked about Syria. So my follow-up is this.
Can I mention, though, in the midst of that?
Sure.
It is because of your questions, the nature of what your interests are, and the importance of what I think we encourage here when it comes to, there's all kinds of countries and cities that are in the news all the time, but things are happening all around the world that affect all of us. And it's that kind of a modern age, and it's exciting to be able to look for those answers and at least provide some insight. So I'm sorry, go ahead.
There is a big expectation for any sanctions relief that U.S. could give to Syria. Is this something the administration is thinking about, and what would it take to give sanctions relief to Syria?
There are the sanctions dynamic has not changed, and there's no plans to change it at this point. But there is, so the existing measures that have always existed remain, and I understand why that's a question. But we have authorized Syria General License 24, which allows for transactions meant to help stabilize Syria. So it is not a blanket block, but the previous measures remain, but there is General License 24, again, that allows for transactions to help facilitate the stabilizing of that nation. All right, yes, sir.
This thing on Syria. You speak a little bit on Syria. I was wondering what's the State Department assessment on the new Syrian constitution that was drafted by the interim authority, which the draft was rejected by the minority groups, and they are saying that it has grants likely no rights of these minority groups, like Kurds and Druze.
So one thing I can tell you, we are following developments that Ahmed al-Sharaa signed, signed a so-called constitutional declaration, and note concerns expressed around consolidation of power by al-Sharaa. We continue to call, as I've mentioned in my first part of my statement, for an inclusive, civilian-led government to ensure national institutions are effective, responsive, legitimate, and representative. And we are continuing to watch the interim authorities' actions to see if they guarantee equal rights and treatment for all Syrians and preserve individual freedoms as outlined in that constitutional declaration. So we continue to watch, and I think that will bear out the nature of what it is we're dealing with. Bottom line, we continue to stand with the people of Syria.
And a question on Iran. You spoke about Iran too, and that the policy of this administration is very clear.
I'm sorry, I'm not here. Can you start again, please?
Yeah, sure. You spoke about Iran, and I think that the policy of this administration towards Iran is pretty much clear. But the Iranian has rejected direct talks with you. My question is that what other options are on the table when it comes to Iran and make Iran that not pursuing getting a nuclear weapons?
Well, certainly sanctions, as we have applied, to say the least. Iran's behavior, as we know, across the globe threatens U.S. national interests, which is why President Trump has reimposed the maximum pressure campaign designated to end Iran's nuclear threat, curtail its ballistic missile program, and stop it from supporting terrorist groups. The president has made clear Iran can never have a nuclear weapon. And that includes, again, the sanctions of nations that are assisting that framework, the sanctions, again, on a company regarding China. And there's a number of things diplomatically that can be done. This administration has been very effective in that regard, considering their position regarding stopping malign behavior, while also believing that wars have to end, to say the least. All right. Yes, Saeed, you asked before. Keep going.
Thank you, Tammy. Just to follow up on the annexation issue, because it's a big issue. It's been the American position, the steadfast official position, that no to reoccupying Gaza and definitely no to annexation. So do you feel that the U.S. is going to stick to this policy, or there's going to be some change regarding this issue? And then I have a follow-up on the humanitarian situation.
Well, and I know you ask, and I appreciate your passion and asking about the humanitarian situation. That's what we all think about. You know, we think about it here at State in a certain fashion, and you do yours. But again, when we think about rumors or suggestions or hypotheses or things talked about in the media, is not a basis for my commentary about whether or not something is or is not going to happen. What I've expressed to you what we do know is what is public and what is the policy of this administration, certainly that Secretary Rubio is committed to, which is ending bloodshed. Now, so there's the talk about annexing things, or that is, if anything, for those of you who care about these issues, it is a distraction to move past the nature of what's going on now with one cause, which is Hamas's attitude and actions. And while we have to deal with what is continuing and not happening because of their choices, we are continuing to try to stop that. So it's interesting that we can continue to keep in light, sir, just a minute, keep in our minds the nature of what's in front of us, which is still to stop the wholesale slaughter of people, the use of other individuals as human shields, the general chaos that causes, and the fact that there are ways to stop it. And that's what we're working on now. But others, perhaps, they want us to always talk about something else to get people distracted about that thing, so you stop looking at what is the thing that we need to deal with immediately. And I look to the Trump administration and to Secretary Rubio as examples of keeping their eyes on the prize and working methodically in this moment to get us to where we need to go.
Just
right.
To follow.
Yeah. Yes. Go ahead.
We're going to switch topics, so if you want to stay on the region.
Well, well, thank you. We'll stay on the region then. Yes, sir.
Tammy just mentioned that your goal is to stop the war and to let the humanitarian aid get inside Gaza, and this is, I believe, the goal of everyone else. Mm-hmm. But according to the UN, Israel stopped aid from going through the crossing 20 days now, consecutively. This is the longest since October 7, and this happened before the renewed airstrikes now, so there was no military operations in the region that prevent aid from going in. Do you feel that this is a collective punishment for Palestinians in Gaza to force Hamas to give some concessions, and is this acceptable?
Well, when you're asking me if I feel something, obviously I'm not going to go into a soliloquy of what I feel. What I can tell you is I also won't speak about a hypothetical or a separate report of what has happened with Israel. You would need to ask the Israeli government about if something occurred that you believe occurred or want clarity on. I don't speak for the Israeli government or for their prime minister. I speak for the U.S. State Department that has an interest in it. But you're asking a question we probably could discuss over dinner. But that's not a question for this podium or for what we are discussing here. What we do know, there are certain things that are facts of the matter, is that Hamas has put Israel and the world and the Gazan people in this position because of the madness, the savagery that they decided would be a good thing to do. I don't know what they thought would occur, but it perhaps is not what has occurred, which is a unity around the world after we saw that atrocity on October 7th. What we also, though, have done for everyone affected as a global issue, certainly first the Gazan people, the Israelis, etc., but as a global unified effort, is to stop the carnage. It's a meat grinder. It's people being used by others who just seem to certainly they're not focused on peace at the end. It is Hamas who needs to be asked certain questions about why this continues, because this has been their choice. There has been elements that have been agreed upon, other steps that the world came together to facilitate that the United States was committed to, and they still abandoned it. Idan Alexander, when we talk about hostages who have been released or killers of Americans who've been extradited, there is an American who is still being held. The bodies of the dead being held. That is what is in front of us. This is what needs to be stopped. And that is what we're committed to. Yes, sir.
My question,
with the glasses there in the back. No, right, the gentleman in front of you, sir.
Yeah. So thank you. Daniele Compatangelo for Italian LA7.
Yes.
A question still about the meeting. If you confirm the meeting with the Israeli and the Americans next week here at the State Department and the White House, and if so, about Iran is going to be. That's from a report on Axios. So can you, if it's true, can you give us some insight?
Nice ending phrase there.
Yeah, can you give us some insight of what we're going to see? Or what?
If this is at the White House, as you suggested, well, I can't tell you what's going to happen at the White House, and I won't be confirming any meetings in this regard.